Hello guys, Dominic again here with another video. This one's going to be a continuation of my last video, where I explained natural law. Today I'm going to be explaining how to live in alignment with natural law. And it's pretty simple. It basically comes down to four principles that you just got to adhere to, and then you'll pretty much be in alignment with natural law. So the first principle is the principle of self-responsibility. You, as an individual, are responsible for your actions at all times and places, regardless of any external influence that you might be under. So it doesn't matter if you're out there doing things for a paycheck. It doesn't matter if you're out there under the orders of some commander or boss. It doesn't matter if you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. These are not excuses that are going to get you out of the choices that you made in your life. And choices are a big part of free will. The reason that self-responsibility is the first principle is because it all comes down to free will. We have the ability to make choices in our lives that are either going to be yes, because we have chosen to accept these circumstances and we've chosen to follow along with whatever choice we said yes to, or we have the choice to say no to things, which is to reject whatever has been presented to us and go down a different path altogether, or maybe even no path. These are the options that we have in our lives. We have circumstances and situations that are presented to us, but how we choose to react to them, which is just yes, are we going to engage in these things? Or no, are we not going to engage in these things? And then from there, if you do engage in things, you may have options in different ways to address certain situations. So in the case of someone who is, drunk driving, they are not absolved of their drunk driving because they're the ones who chose in the first place to drink and get behind the wheel in an intoxicated state, and they weren't able to handle it. Just like if you are a soldier who killed people in a foreign country, you are not absolved of those crimes or those actions because someone told you it was okay. There's nothing an individual can do to negate their own agency in the face of these choices. The only individuals who I would say do have some level of absolve, right, so that they're not always responsible for their actions, would be children, because children are still developing their principles. They're still learning their body, and they're still learning the world around them. So they cannot take responsibility for the actions which they do with their body. And then the second group of people who I would say are absolved are people who are extremely mentally ill. However, I would say that mental illness is a lot of the time a result or a consequence of people who are out of alignment with these principles that I'm talking about. I'm not saying that's the case for every mentally ill person, but I think that if people adhere to these principles that I'm talking about here, there would probably be a lot less mentally ill people and depressed people. So the first principle to live in alignment with natural law is accepting that you are in control of your body, you have free will, and you are totally responsible of all the choices that you make in your life. So that's the first principle. The second principle is the principle of non-aggression. Do not initiate harm unto other sentient beings. And harm is just basically an individual who has violated the rights of other individuals by directly interfering with their ability to make free will choices. There are 7 actions which constitute harm and allow other people to violate other beings' free will. And these actions are murder, rape, assault, theft, trespass, lying, and coercion. Each one of these actions is the initiation of the theft of property. Property is that which properly belongs to the individual. So murder is the theft of life. Trespass is the theft of safety within one's living space. Deception is the theft of truthful information, which you are trying to impose not truthful information over a person to get them to make a decision that they would not have made in the first place, or that is inherently harmful to them as an individual. Theft is ultimately the initiation of harm. Stealing that which properly belongs to others and trying to take it because you think that it belongs to you. All it comes down to is a being freely expressing their will in the universe, or are they having to react to the will of another being because they are being violated. Their rights are being violated, which is what violence is. The violation of another being's ability to express themselves in the objective world. Now, harm itself is not subjective. Harm is only subjective in the sense that the individual who is experiencing the harm is being subjected to the will of another being against their free will in a way that steals their property, that which is properly theirs. However, that subjective experience is happening in the objective world, where anyone who sees it or anyone who comes across it recognizes that that is harmful behavior. So, for example, if you're driving down the street and you happen to look down an alley and someone's getting mugged, almost anyone looking down that alley is going to recognize a victim and an initiator. So the victim is experiencing the harm of the initiator, and the initiator is experiencing causing harm to others. These are subjective experiences, yes, but they happen in the objective world where objective consequences are generated beyond the individuals that affect others. So, harm is basically the theft of property, with that which is properly yours. Right? So the second principle is do not initiate harm under any circumstances. So that brings me to the third principle, the principle of self-defense. The principle of self-defense is when harm has been initiated, it is the right and even the obligation of those involved or those who know of the harm that's been initiated to stop it. When someone has initiated harm, they have voided their rights because they have said, by me choosing to partake in these harmful behaviors, I have set a standard for myself that, I basically should be mirrored to me. So if you hit someone, you deserve to be hit back. And you shouldn't be standing around there wondering, gee, I wonder why I got hit. even after you struck the person. So the reason that this is an obligation of those who are able is because if you know that evil or harm is being generated and initiated in the world, and you do nothing to stop it, you are essentially complacent with that harm and letting it flourish and continue. Not everyone is capable of stopping the harm, right? Which is why I say able-bodied people and people who are in the know. Now, ideally, self-defense should be conducted in a way that reduces the amount of harm to all those involved. However, the individual who has initiated the harm should be stopped by any means that is necessary. This could involve shooting them, or stabbing them, or blowing them up, or whatever was needed to be done to stop them. You know, it doesn't always have to become deadly, but if it does become deadly, self-defense is still justified. However, forgiveness is the highest spiritual achievement, and forgiveness of our enemies and transgressors will ensure that the defenders do not become just like those they are fighting against or putting in the effort to stop. So, proportionate response, which is what the U.S. military claims to do, but they don't really seem to do that. Proportionate response, if actually applied, is the proper way to conduct self-defense. And it should be done so with the conscious mindset that we are to forgive this person, but that does not absolve them of their crimes, and that does not mean that we should not enact force to stop them if necessary. But it does make us remember what we chose to fight for in the first place, to stop the initiator. So the third principle is that of self-defense. When harm has been initiated, it is your right as an individual to defend yourself and others. And now for the fourth principle. The fourth principle is optional. No one can be forced to do this principle, just like no one can be forced to do any of the other principles that I mentioned. Everything I mentioned, the initiation of harm, the ability to defend others against harm, it's all our choice. And nothing is forcing us to make that choice. But the fourth principle is to rise above all those principles. And this is the principle of service unto others, and recognizing that sacrifice to make others' lives easier and to help them grow in a way that is in alignment with love is the highest virtue. Service unto others is essentially living love. You recognize that all other beings are just like you. You love yourself and you love your neighbor equally, and you express that through your actions. This is what service unto others is. However, to reach this point, you have to come to the realization of the other principles in order to truly live a life of service unto others. And with that, that is the fourth and final principle. Optional, simple. All these principles are simple. Nothing is complex when it comes to natural law and living a life in alignment with God. I would close this video by saying when you do live these principles and you accept them into your heart and transmute them into action, you are essentially putting yourself in alignment with the tune or the frequency of God. Just like a compass that always points north, living a life with these principles will make sure that your lower self is always oriented towards your higher self, which ensures that your higher self is oriented towards your highest self, which is the origin, which is where these principles come from in the first place. Harm is just interference from this signal. The lack of self-responsibility is just static in your mind that reorients you south instead of north. So these principles, they're very real, and this is why I would say most people have trouble finding God or understanding what God is all about, because they don't understand God's principles. But if you do come to understand God's principles, the universe will be revealed to you. The you and I verse. You and I existing in this moment together in harmony. This is what God's principles are all about. And this is what they generate. And it expresses its free will through us. And, the choice is entirely ours. Are we going to align with these principles or not? And that's my video today, guys. It is pretty much a part 2 of my last video, where now I'm telling you how to live in alignment with natural law. Where my last video I explained what natural law is. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again.